I have spent most of my life around capital, and the public still keeps asking the same question in different clothes. What is the fastest way to get rich? That question is usually a sign that the person asking it is already standing too close to the wrong door. The fast-looking door is almost never the real one. The real door is usually plain, unadvertised, low drama, repetitive, and so ordinary that most ambitious people walk right past it because they think wealth ought to feel more exciting on the way in. I have never found that to be true. A great many fortunes are built in places the cocktail crowd would never brag about: air filters, trash storage units, window cleaning, towing, machine rentals, small repetitive services nobody dreams about when they are 22 and intoxicated on the idea of becoming extraordinary. That is why these businesses can be so powerful. They are too boring to attract the wrong kind of attention. People love stories that make success sound like lightning. A new technology, a giant insight, a market call, a once-in-a-generation idea. Those things exist from time to time, but they are not where most durable wealth is built. Most durable wealth is built where there is recurring need, modest drama, daily usefulness, predictable cash collection, and enough operational discipline to keep the machine alive while the owner quietly buys more of the machine. That is the whole thing. Not sexy, not exciting, not fun to post about. Wonderful. The market already has enough people chasing whatever sounds hottest this quarter. The person who wants to become truly wealthy should learn to be interested in things other people find too ordinary to admire. I learned that lesson early, when I was young in Omaha. I did not begin with some grand philosophy about empires. I began with little observations. Newspapers got delivered every day. Pinball machines made money every day. People drank Coca-Cola every day. People chewed the same gum, bought the same candy, used the same razor blades, filled the same gas tanks, deposited the same paychecks, and repeated the same little acts of life with astonishing regularity. That regularity is one of the greatest sources of wealth in the world. The crowd thinks wealth comes from what is extraordinary. Very often it comes from what is reliable. A customer who comes back is more valuable than a customer who gasps. A payment that repeats is more beautiful than a sale that gets applause. A business that quietly throws off cash month after month can become one of the strongest wealth machines on earth precisely because it asks for so little imagination from the customer. The customer does not need to be inspired. He only needs to need the thing again. That is a much stronger foundation. I have always preferred businesses where human behavior does most of the work. If the product or service is woven into ordinary life, if the replacement cycle is natural, if the demand is boring enough to survive fashion, if the economics can be understood by a rational adult without prayer, then I become interested. Not because all boring businesses are good. Many are terrible because when a boring business is good, it often stays good while louder people search for something cleverer and miss the cash piling up in the dull corner of the room. A fellow once asked me why so many rich people come from businesses that sound too plain to deserve the outcome. He thought there must be some secret hidden under the surface. There is. The secret is repetition plus ownership. That is really all. If you can control something people pay for regularly, and if you can preserve a decent spread between what it costs you to deliver and what they pay you, and if you can repeat that enough times without too much fresh drama each month, then eventually the business starts doing something magical. It pays for itself, then it pays for growth. Then, it pays for the next machine. That is where fortunes begin, not when the first customer buys. When the first machine buys the second one, I want to speak plainly about the kinds of businesses the public dismisses, because that dismissal is often exactly what makes them attractive. Consider the humble ATM. Most people see an ATM and think only of the machine. A serious operator sees traffic cash velocity, service reliability, and location economics. The public thinks the machine makes money. The truth is that the location makes money, the uptime makes money, and the cash management makes money. The machine is merely the body. If the machine sits in the wrong place, it is metal. If the machine is empty, it is furniture. But put that machine in the right nail salon, convenience store, or neighborhood business, where cash still matters and withdrawals are habitual. Keep it working, keep it funded, negotiate the location intelligently, and suddenly a small box becomes a repetitive cash stream. What makes that beautiful is not that one machine changes your life. It rarely does. What makes it beautiful is that one machine teaches the economics of the second, and the second teaches the economics of the fourth, and the fourth begins to create enough cash to fund the eighth. The public wants scale first. The serious owner wants proof first. That is a very different temperament. A retired police officer buying one machine with a couple $1,000s and learning the route before multiplying is behaving more intelligently than the fellow with a slide deck, a slogan, and a six-figure loan, trying to look impressive before he has learned the business. Start small is not timid advice. It is compounding advice. Small lets you survive the part where you do not yet know what you do not know. This is true in far more than ATM businesses. It is true in nearly every durable, boring business I admire. Take laundromats. People hear the phrase passive income, and their judgment starts leaking out of their ears. They imagine a room full of machines doing all the work while the owner goes fishing. That is nonsense. If something sounds too passive in a field full of worn-out washers, broken coin mechanisms, cleanliness issues, lease pressure, water bills, machine replacement cycles, and neighborhood competition, then the person speaking to you is either a salesman or a fool. Yet that does not make the business bad. It makes the business real. Reality is where the money lives. A laundromat is not attractive because it is effortless. It is attractive because laundry is a repeated need, because many customers are habitual, because the ticket size is not emotionally difficult, and because, well, run locations in the right neighborhoods can create very consistent cash flow. The problem is that people romanticize the machine and ignore the operating system. Machines need maintenance. Floors need cleaning. Security matters. The location matters enormously. The customer experience matters more than people assume. Water and utility costs matter. The fellow who says a laundromat is effortless is telling you he has probably never had to unlock one at 7 in the morning after a machine overflowed the night before. But the fellow who understands that it is a service business disguised as a machine business has a better chance. That distinction matters. The public keeps splitting businesses into neat categories: property businesses, service businesses, passive businesses, active businesses. Life is not that clean. The best boring businesses often have a machine on the surface and a service underneath, or they have a service on the surface and a route underneath, or they look like a local chore but hide a scalable process underneath. That is why I have always liked people who can see the engine instead of the label. A laundromat is not about washers. It is about recurring need in a constrained geography with predictable behavior and the possibility of operational improvement. If the rent is sensible, if the location is sound, if the machines are maintained, if the customer volume is real, and if the operator does not spend like a drunk sailor the moment cash starts coming in, the business can become a very strong little machine. Now, let me turn to a business type that most people ignore because the objects involved are ugly equipment rental. This is a marvelous category because it reveals something the public forgets. A machine becomes much more valuable when its owner's pain is lower than the renter's urgency. If a plant goes down, if an air compressor breaks, if a job site needs a piece of specialized equipment right now, if the delay costs the customer thousands or tens of thousands a day, then a well-positioned owner of the right piece of rental equipment can name a very respectable price. The customer is not comparing your day rate to the perfect world. He is comparing it to the cost of stoppage. That is why urgency businesses can be so attractive. The thing being rented may not be beautiful. It may be loud, greasy, heavy, and mechanically irritating. All fine. It does not have to look good in a brochure. It has to keep someone else's expensive problem from getting worse. That is enough. What I like about equipment rental is that it forces you to think clearly about service intensity, logistics, asset utilization, and tax efficiency all at once. A $100,000 machine that can be rented repeatedly into real need is a different sort of asset from a vanity purchase, But again, the public hears this and wants the fantasy. They imagine buying one excavator or compressor and becoming rich while asleep. No, the logistics matter. Maintenance matters, delivery matters, response time matters. The asset cannot just exist. It must be available, functioning, and supported. That is the adult version of the business. The adult version is almost always less glamorous and more profitable than the fantasy version. Then there are the service businesses people look down on because the entry cost is low: window cleaning, pest control, HVAC repair, pool cleaning, lawn care, property management. People dismiss these because they can imagine themselves doing the labor, or because they think any low-barrier field must be structurally weak. That is lazy thinking. A field can have low barriers to entry and still contain wonderful economics. Once someone builds route density, trust, response systems, staff discipline, local awareness, and recurring contracts, people confuse the first dollar with the millionth. Yes, a man can start window cleaning with soap, a bucket, and a squeegee. Wonderful. That is not a weakness. That is an opportunity to begin with almost no capital and learn the customer from the ground up. The trouble with many educated people is that they are embarrassed by humble beginnings. They want a business that looks important before it has earned the right to be important. That impulse has cost many fortunes. The man who starts lean, solves a real problem, understands the work, and then builds systems around that reality has a much better chance of eventually owning something remarkable than the man who starts with a magnificent logo and no understanding of how the work is actually performed. If you have washed windows yourself, you know route timing, you know the customer complaints, you know how weather interferes, you know how labor quality affects repeat business, you know what happens when equipment fails, you know where the margin really disappears. Those are not small advantages. They are the foundation of the system. That is what the public misses. A lot of successful businesses look simple from the outside because the complexity has already been organized into routines by someone else. That is the value, not complexity itself. Organized complexity, service businesses become. The local HVAC company is not attractive because air conditioners are exciting. They are not. It is attractive because every heat wave creates urgency, every winter creates failure points, every home and business eventually has maintenance needs, and a good operator with trusted technicians, proper scheduling, and a strong local reputation is not really in the repair business. He is in the predictable problem business. That is one of the finest businesses in the world. A predictable problem with high urgency and reasonable pricing power is a beautiful thing. And when the work is local, the national giants are not always as dangerous as people imagine. This is another major principle the public keeps forgetting. The local moat is real. Not every moat is technological. Not every moat is patent-based. Not every moat is global scale. A local moat can come from speed, trust, proximity, route density, knowledge of the neighborhood, and a brand that is strong within a narrow geography. That is why I like the old Domino's lesson so much. Before you conquer the continent, conquer a neighborhood. People who try to expand before they are locally excellent often confuse ambition with dilution. I prefer concentration before scale. If you cannot dominate a small service area, what makes you think spreading your confusion into 5 service areas will improve the economics? It usually worsens them. This is why the right boring business strategy begins with a map, not a fantasy. Study the town, study the area, study what is missing, study what customers keep needing. Study where response times are bad, where incumbents are lazy, where service windows are unreliable, where local demand is obvious but local execution is mediocre. You do not need to reinvent civilization. You need to identify recurring pain and then decide whether you can build a cleaner system around it. That is much more realistic, which is precisely why so many people ignore it. They would rather imagine something original than execute something needed. There is also another category of boring wealth I want people to understand: the ugly necessity business, towing trash, recycling, storage. These businesses can look so unromantic that intelligent people overlook them entirely. Good. that helps the owner. If a truck breaks down on a stretch of highway and only one operator nearby has the right heavy towing capability, that operator is not selling excitement. He is selling urgency resolution. Those are some of the best economics in business when the service area is defensible. The same thing is true in waste. Nobody wakes up dreaming of becoming a giant in garbage collection. That is one reason garbage collection works. The demand is real, recurring, and not dependent on fashion. The public often assumes wealth must emerge from the sexy edge of the economy. That is adolescent thinking. A lot of wealth emerges from unsexy necessities because necessity is harder to cancel than preference. Trash must still be removed when the economy is weak. Storage bills still get paid because human beings do not like letting go of things. Tow trucks still get called because engines do not care about your household budget. These are not beautiful stories. They are beautiful economics. But I need to say something very important before the wrong people hear only the upside. Boring does not mean easy. This is where the public gets itself in trouble. It hears repeat revenue and starts daydreaming. No, every one of these categories has operational reality attached. Tow trucks break. Drivers must be hired, trained, and retained. Machines fail. Insurance exists. Water bills exist. Vandalism exists. City permits exist. Location negotiations exist. Collection risk exists. Maintenance exists. Reputation exists. A boring business does not free you from work. It simply gives you a chance to build wealth from work that can be systematized and repeated rather than reinvented every morning. That is the difference. And in my experience, that difference is one of the most underappreciated differences in the world. People keep trying to build wealth through businesses that require endless novelty, endless content invention, endless emotional performance, endless trend prediction, endless promotional excitement. That can work for some people. It is not my favorite route. I prefer businesses where the customer need is already present and the owner's job is mainly to deliver with discipline. Discipline compounds better than charm. Another thing I like about boring businesses is that they teach capital allocation very quickly. If you own a vending route, a laundromat, a small rental machine fleet, or a local service business, the cash that comes in creates immediate questions. Do you consume it? Do you repair the asset? Do you improve the route? Do you hire one more person? Do you buy the next machine? Do you expand the territory? Do you reduce debt? Do you keep reserves? These are excellent questions because they are real. They teach a person the difference between revenue and ownership. Many businesses fail not because they had no cash flow, but because the owner began treating the cash flow as a salary increase for his ego. That is fatal. A small, boring business can absolutely make you rich if the cash it throws off is used to purchase more productive assets rather than more visible consumption. That is the great dividing line. One man owns a route and starts driving a more expensive truck, so people know he is doing well. Another man owns a route and buys the second route. 10 years later, one is easier to notice and the other is easier to envy. I know which one interests me. The public keeps making the same emotional mistake. It wants the rewards of ownership without the emotional discipline ownership requires. That is why so many people never turn a good small business into a strong large one. They celebrate too early, they draw too much. They think the first cash means they have arrived. In truth, the first cash is often just the first test. Will you eat the seed or plant it? That question sits underneath nearly every fortune I admire. Now, if you want to build a boring business intelligently, the first rule is not to fall in love with the finished empire. Fall in love with proof. Can the model get customers? Can it get repeat customers? Can it get them at a cost that leaves room? Can it be delivered consistently? Can the work be documented, trained, delegated, and measured? Can the business operate locally with excellence before it tries to impress anyone with scale? Those are the real questions. This is why I love the idea of proving demand before building a giant cost structure around a dream. There is no prize for manufacturing at scale before you know whether anyone wants what you are selling. The same principle that works in factories works in service businesses. Test first, validate first, find the customer before you build the cathedral. If you have a service, create a simple landing page, run targeted local ads, see whether people respond. If you want to offer something labor-intensive, perhaps outsource or subcontract, the first wave carefully while you learn whether demand is real and what the customer actually values. Keep risk low while you are still learning the truth. That is not cowardice. It is one of the finest habits in business. The public keeps confusing big moves with brave moves. I do not. A brave move is one where the downside was understood and managed before the step was taken. A loud move is often just a loud move. This is another reason I like boring businesses. They often allow learning in smaller increments. One machine, one route, one truck, one neighborhood, one service team, one well-defined customer base. That is the right order. You cannot build sensible scale on top of confusion. Now I should tell you what I think is the deepest reason boring businesses make so many millionaires. It is not only the recurring cash flow, it is not only the local moat, it is not only the repeat behavior. It is the fact that these businesses often sit close to the owner, and closeness matters in the beginning. A local operator can see the economics with his own eyes. He sees the dirty machine. He hears the customer complaint. He sees the missed route. He knows the worker who cuts corners. He knows the stop where the cash is strongest. He knows which location is underperforming and why distance can come later. Closeness first is an advantage. The problem with glamorous businesses is that people want distance before they understand the economics. They want to own from afar. They want leverage, scale, and abstraction immediately. That is often how people lose money while telling themselves they are thinking big. I do not admire distance in the beginning. I admire intimacy with the economics. Let the owner get close enough to understand what really drives the result. Then systematize, then delegate carefully, then expand. That is how a machine is built instead of merely imagined. If you ask me what the perfect boring business looks like, I would say it usually has several traits. The service or product is needed repeatedly. The ticket size is not so painful that customers hesitate for weeks. The operating process can be standardized. The local market can be understood. The owner can gradually control the key asset or route structure underneath the cash flow. And the cash generated can be redeployed into more of the same or into adjacent machines. That is a beautiful formula. Not because every example becomes an empire, many do not, but because the formula itself creates the possibility of compounding in the real world. You would be amazed how rich a person can become by owning something that a normal citizen barely notices while driving by. That is not an insult. It is praise. If the machine is too visible, too glamorous, too trendy, too narrated, too discussed, the odds rise that too much capital will chase it and the economics will become less attractive. Quietness is often part of the moat. Now, I also want to say a word about trades and local knowledge, because many young people are being steered away from precisely the kinds of knowledge that would allow them to own one of these systems later. The world flatters abstraction. It tells bright young people to seek white-collar prestige first and practical understanding later, if at all. That can work for some. But I have no problem saying something unfashionable. A person who learns HVAC deeply, or plumbing, or a specialized repair field, or route operations, or some other humble but necessary line of work, may end up much richer than the fellow who learned to speak impressively about strategy while never understanding where customers actually exchange money for relief. Relief is the thing. Relief from heat, relief from dirt, relief from a dead engine, relief from full trash bins, relief from broken equipment, relief from windows the customer does not want to clean himself. The modern economy is full of people trying to sell aspiration. It still quietly rewards those who sell relief. That is a useful thing to remember. The fellow who understands the work has a path the theorist often does not. He can start with labor, translate that labor into trust, translate trust into systems, translate systems into routes, translate routes into cash flow, and eventually translate cash flow into ownership of assets he no longer has to personally service every hour. That is a real ladder, and it is available to many more people than the culture admits. The culture likes prestige ladders. I like economic ladders. If the prestige ladder leaves you dependent and the economic ladder leaves you freer, I know which ladder I prefer. By now, you may think I am arguing that everyone should rush out and buy an ATM or a tow truck or a laundromat. That would be the wrong lesson. The lesson is not the object. The lesson is the pattern. Find low drama, repeated demand. Keep costs low in the beginning. Validate before scaling. Focus locally before spreading thin. Understand the work before abstracting it. Build systems from first-hand pain. Use cash flow to buy the next productive unit rather than a louder lifestyle. Stay interested in what others find too boring to admire. That is the pattern. The exact business can change by city, by decade, by personality, by skill set. The pattern is what endures, and because it endures, it is worth a great deal. If I were starting today with limited capital and a desire to eventually control serious wealth, I would not sit around fantasizing about the perfect moonshot. I would begin by studying my local map. Where do people spend money repeatedly without much emotional deliberation? What breaks and needs fixing quickly? What service is visibly mediocre? What root businesses already exist? What owner-operated shops are aging out and may someday be bought? What necessary ugly business in my area is earning more than the public assumes and receiving less admiration than the economics deserve? Those are the right questions. The public thinks the future belongs only to the glamorous frontier. I think the future also belongs, as it often has, to the people willing to master the ordinary and compound it. That has been true in many of my favorite businesses. Candy was ordinary, insurance was ordinary to most people. Waste removal is ordinary, car dealerships are ordinary. Furniture stores are ordinary. What mattered was not glamour. What mattered was whether the economics, management, and price created a machine worth owning. The same principle applies in smaller local form. A boring machine well understood is better than an exciting machine imagined. That is the conclusion I trust. People tell me they want passive income. I do not love the phrase because it attracts fantasy. Most good income is not passive in the beginning. It becomes more passive only after a great deal of thoughtful design, repetition, and discipline. The person who wants the passive stage without the building stage is not really asking for a business. He is asking for a fairy tale. I have no fairy tales to offer. I have something better. A realistic path. A path where modest beginnings are not shameful, where learning the ugly details is part of the edge, where the business may look too plain to impress the crowd, and where the right kind of repetitive cash flow can eventually become the down payment on your next freedom. That is enough for me. It should be enough for anyone serious about wealth. The world keeps telling young people to search for the idea no one has seen. Often they would do much better searching for the need everyone can see, but no one interesting enough wants to serve. That is where money hides, not always in invention, often in neglected repetition. And once you see that clearly, a whole new world opens. The air filter company stops looking like a boring factory and starts looking like a recurring replacement cycle with local and national distribution leverage. The window cleaning business stops looking like a man with a bucket and starts looking like route density, service standards, labor systems, and customer retention. The tow truck stops looking like a noisy vehicle and starts looking like emergency pricing power in a constrained geography. The ATM stops looking like a metal box and starts looking like a behavioral toll booth. The laundromat stops looking like a room of machines and starts looking like recurring neighborhood utility. The waste business stops looking dirty and starts looking indispensable. That is the shift. The rich do not see what others see. More accurately, they see the same thing and interpret it economically. That is the skill, not brilliance, interpretation. A boring business is often a pile of hidden economics waiting for the right owner to respect it properly. Respect enough of them, own them long enough, and one day people will say you were fortunate to find such simple opportunities. No, you were simply willing to commit to what other people found too boring to take seriously. That difference is worth a great deal. It always has been, and I expect it always will be.